Meeting, we have a pretty full agenda, so want to get going. I'll turn it over to Miss Lita Hinkle to do the determination of a quorum.
It's actually Mr. Eugene Lang.
Okay,
Okay, yep,
sorry, Eugene.
no problem. Polignello,
Here.
Jamie Jackson,
I'm here. I'm on my way.
thank you. Matthew Lehane. Here. Batam Amin,
Here.
Kathy Coffey. Adam Derrick,
Here, online.
Melody Fowler,
Here.
Amy Garbarini,
Here, online.
Kate Gibson,
Here.
Christine Hefner, Leon Hughes, Daniel Koenig, Linda Lasut, here. Stephen Minor, Nick Ruiz, Robert Schneider, and Rodney White. All right, Chair, we have a
Sounds great. So the next item is the approval of the agenda. There were two minor changes. One is on 6C to make that a action item for the approval of the tip amendments. The second one is on the back page under number 9, the staff reports. The date for the deadline for the TAP and revenue sharing pre-application should be May 30th instead of May 5th. Does anyone have any comments on those changes or any other changes to the agenda?
Motion for approval.
Is there a second?
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. All right, so that brings us to public comments. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak? Okay, sounds good. Thank you, sir. Okay, so that will move us on to the consent agenda. Are there any questions on the consent agenda before we act? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. That brings us to 6A, tip amendments and modifications. I guess, Ian, are you going to handle this one?
John?
John is, okay.
Yep, so good morning. So we have two actually items to approve, that's A and B. First one is adjust funding for Fredericksburg Central Office renovations. They're renovating 2 spaces to convert them into bit offices. And number 2 is adding the Harrison Road widening study to DTIP. And finally, item C is opening public comment for Fredericksburg Go. They're looking to install driver barriers on their vehicles. So to add those, and that's falling into the miscellaneous category for FRT 0003.
Are there any questions for John?
Can I motion for all 3 at once? Okay, do it one by one.
Well, let me just ask, does anyone have any questions or comments on any of the 3 tip amendments?
Are they easy to understand? Because we will get questions again at the policy committee. So if anybody thinks there's something unclear. No.
So say I have no concerns if someone wants to make a motion to approve all 3.
All right, I'll make a motion to approve 6A, 6B, and 6C.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes. That brings us down to 7A, the PWP with Miss Becky Golden and Mr. Ian Wallace.
This is your FY26 UPWP. We put it together. Request is to issue the direction for public comment.
Mr. Chair, if there are questions about the document, we'd be very happy to answer questions. If anybody suggests an amendment or a change, we're happy to take those. But what I do ask is that we put out a document for public comment today, because we have this timeline with VDOT where we have to, first of all, have 30 days public comment, and second of all, we have to get it into them before the end of this fiscal year. So there is a timeline on this one, but we're very happy. Even if the TAC wants to send us an email next week, that's fine. We'll take those because we'll bring it back next month with the final draft. One thing that is on here that I can already tell you is incorrect. It's not an error. Amy will bear me out, but we don't yet have the correct FY26 DRPT's 5303 funding numbers from DRPT. So, and that's got to do with the FTA needing to give them numbers, and that's got to do with Congress and budgets. So those numbers I can already tell you will be modified, but it's in the ballpark. It might go up a little bit, it might go down a little bit, but the numbers are roughly in the ballpark. So when you get the amended one next month, hopefully DRPT has already given us the corrected numbers, and then we'll modify those. So what I did was I put numbers in there that based on last year's numbers plus a very small increase, which we hope we'll get. And that gives you a rough idea to proceed with, but at least those numbers will change. That I can already tell you. We have also included two amounts which, Chairman, also occur in these spreadsheets. So we like to give disclosure so you know what's going on. We've included in the UPWP $100,000 to perform the, sorry, no, we haven't. Sorry, that's for FY27, it's 100,000 to do the LRTP 2055 update, which we have to, by law, do in FY27. It's not in this one. What we have included in this one is $70,000 to do scenario planning that leads up to the LRTP and will create the chapter in the LRTP on future scenario planning. That $70,000 is in the UPWP. Again, that requires the policy committee approval. It seemed that the consensus at the last policy committee meeting was that we should do some scenario planning. Nobody, a couple of members suggested we should do it. Nobody objected, so I put it in here. But again, if there's some requested change on any of those items, we can make those changes. We're not hiding it or anything. It's in there. Following year, we would recommend adding 100,000 for the LRTP. Just to take your mind back to the 2050 LRTP. When I arrived at FAMPO, the 2050 LRTP had already begun. Staff were already working on it. A consultant was already appointed before my time, and that was Cambridge Systematics. And I inherited it partway through the process. The budget for that LRTP was actually $500,000, which those who were members of the TAC and the policy committee then would have approved. This cycle, I'm suggesting only 100,000 for the LRTP and 70,000 to do the scenario planning. I've done some scouting around to see what consultants would charge us. So we're not looking for the $500,000. We're looking for $100,000, but that's not in this UPWP. It will only happen in the next UPWP. And $70,000 to do a better job of scenario planning. I literally did it myself last time with my laptop, and VDOT kindly agreed to run the model for 3 scenarios of, low growth, medium growth, high growth. That really I shouldn't be writing the chapter without the proper process. So I'm suggesting the $70,000 to do the proper process. So that's sort of the motivation, the explanation. We're not hiding anything. It's in the numbers. And the only thing I ask is that whatever you feel about any items in the UPWP, you just give us permission to have public comment. We will bring a revised one to the next TAC with any changes you request or any things that the policy committee requests to change or whatever that. If the public comment strongly against something, we do that as well.
Matthew.
So the 70,000 you scattered out, I believe that's a good number.
No, the 70,000 is for
Scenario.
scenario
Yeah,
planning.
modeling.
Well, it will involve a public workshop, right? It will involve a facilitator who will come, because the perception always is if you do it inside that you're biased, right? So you get a facilitator who's done scenario planning before, and they facilitate a workshop. They help us do modeling, and they help us produce a report based on everybody's input, based on the modeling, which then becomes the basis of the chapter 5, I think it is, in the LRTP. So then you have your chapter almost done, but it's done by participation, not by one person in a laptop punching out some details.
So if you provide at the next meeting, just what that would look like,
Yes,
and where that cost comes from,
sure.
just so that we're expansive understanding of that.
I got quotes that are much more expensive, but I've found at least one that is a more reasonable way to go. So anyway, Chair, that's the kind of explanation. Of course, it's a long document, so we're happy to take other questions.
So I had two questions. One is just with the funding levels with the PL 5303, any other monies, like how do those compare for this year, for the last year? Then I also had a question about the 70,000.
Sure.
We'll take the first one.
Sure. So the actual annual PL funds from VDOT, it's about just under a 10% increase, but the rollover that we're able to roll over from this year to next year through the deprogramming process is much smaller. We didn't have as the budget is leaner this current year. We didn't have a lot of extra money to place, so we've rolled over an amount of 48 or 49,000. Last year we were able to roll over a much bigger amount. So the net effect is that it's an increase, but it's not as much as a 10% increase because the rollover is so small. So it's a I don't know, maybe 6 or I don't have the exact percentage in my head, but sort of like 6% maybe. The net, like if you want to compare it. Did I answer the?
Yeah,
Oh, sorry, the 5303 is the other half of the answer.
Okay.
And that is what I said earlier, which is I don't know, because the team at DRPT have not given us numbers. So what I did was I took last year's number and I added 4% to it. Because you'll remember we had that population growth that happened between the 2010 and the 2020 census, which resulted in VDOT and DRPT's calculation for our region going up. But then they took most of it away because they needed to phase it in because areas that were losing money would feel a big drop 2 years ago. And they affected their staffing. They might have had to let staff go. And so it was agreed that VDOT and DRPT's increase to FAMPO would be phased in over 3 years. So we don't see the full impact of that population increase yet. By next year's money, we will finally be almost at the increase level minus the PL and 5303 funding that was allocated to the Tri-Cities MPO, which is Petersburg, because they weren't getting a basic MPO PL funding allocation, something historical before my time. It was given to Richmond, and then Richmond had to give a portion of their money to the Tri-Cities MPO. I don't know if it was a new MPO established or whether they just forgot to do it, but they never got a basic allocation. And so because we as a state had to give them a basic allocation, the increase of most of us that went up didn't quite go up as much as we would have seen, because a portion of everybody's had to go to fund the Tri-Cities MPO. So it's a bit of a moving. Sorry about all the detail, everyone, but that's the correct answer is all of that detail.
So overall, like with PL and 5303 funding, it's maybe about the same as it was last year.
I don't know what the 5303 money is. It should go up. So I'm saying there should be an increase. There is an increase in the appeal funds. Don't know yet what the number is for 5303. As soon as Amy and Tiffany at DRPT send me numbers, I can answer an accurate answer to the question, which I can do at next
Yeah.
month's meeting.
So it sounds like there's a slight increase.
Yes.
And then I guess with the STBG, like the purpose of the 70,000 is only for scenario planning.
Yes. I mean, I'm happy to state on the record, and you can put it in the minutes, that if we're able to get it for less money, happy to give that money back into the balance entry for Tampa to reallocate to a project. But we're not going to get it less than about 55,000. You know,
Even 70 is modest.
even 70 is modest. People don't work for lower amounts when they've got to come and present, and they've got to do some model runs, which we have to pay for,
Public and
all that stuff. So it's modest.
And I'll say just with the scenario planning, is that required by either VDOT or Federal Highway for Tampa to do?
It's not required by law. There is a, where did I put a link? Somewhere we put a link to the document. It's one of those recommended things, but the reason why is because it's been in our LRTP for decades as a chapter. It's chapter 5 of the LRTP. It's been there since, I don't know, maybe before your time. I don't know when they started putting in scenario planning in the LRTP. But because we now have this chapter, in order to update it, you really should do a better process than me and my laptop. This is kind of, otherwise, I mean, the other alternative is that we remove it from our LRTP. But it was in the previous LRTP, it's in the current LRTP. And I'm operating on the assumption that it will continue to be in the LRTP. So I guess those are the backgrounds. Most MPOs do it, but there's no absolute law that says that you absolutely must do it. So it is possible legally to remove it, but it is, you remember last month, we got that email from VDOT modeling to say that they think that our population estimates in the model are too high, and they would encourage us to do scenarios where we look at, if we achieve those population numbers, this is what it will do to the transportation system. But if we get a more moderate population increase, what will that look like? So that we've looked at a, you know, low road, high road type scenario for the future to allocate funding to projects and so on.
Matthew.
I guess the only other thing I'll say is with regards to scenario planning, I'd note the last item under staff reports, exactly what you just mentioned, which is that discussion of population and employment. How Spotsylvania is 21% higher than Weldon Cooper and Stafford is 12% higher than Weldon Cooper. We're all significantly higher than other MPOs. So there is potentially a want or maybe a need to completely reconstruct our assumptions. So just throwing that out there,
It's
that 70,000 seems very low for wanting to do a good job rather than just trying to do the pyramid.
well, I guess that's the thing. I mean, I put in I know that there are funding pressures this cycle, so I did not want to put in a big dollar value. It is a very minimal amount to do a basic process. I'm not sure that, I know what you're saying and I agree with the sentiment. I'm not sure it's the land use that's the problem with our model numbers. I think it's the total number that we put in for the population that's the problem, and the total number in some cases for jobs. And John will tell you that we pushed back on the city's jobs numbers quite significantly and reduced those because the real growth in jobs in the city has been much lower than the projection. So we adjusted the projection down, but we didn't push back on all of you in terms of the population numbers, and we don't seem to think our population numbers are too high.
I mean, I'll just say we did a study in our courthouse area and we completely redid some because they were inaccurate for current growth in that area. So up and down in differentiation. So just throwing that out there, there is need in my mind to completely reconstruct all of that for the 2055 FRT. So
So I had a couple more questions. So this with
Yes.
100,000 for FY 27,
Yes,
that for scenario planning as well?
no,
No,
that is to pay a consultant to do the systems performance report, which we can't do in-house. It's a complicated thing.
right.
And to get them to review our financial plan is what the chapter is called. I think it's chapter 7. That involves us making a decision about inflation. And it's got to be compound inflation into the future when you do the constrained long-range plan. So when you're going to fiscally constrain the projects that we put in the next LRTP, you've got to say, okay, what are the cost estimates today? And then you've got to work on inflation to work out what the cost estimate is going to be in the year that you intend to build the project. So if we're only going to build the project in 2050, you can't use a cost estimate of today. So how do you account for that? You account for that with an inflation measure, and it's got to be compound inflation because inflation doubles up every so often. And we used last time Cambridge Systematics to do the system performance report. We also used them to review our financial assumptions, and they found an error, by the way. So it is good to have an outside body just review those numbers to make sure that we're not putting errors into the logic. So that's what that 100,000.
And we're supportive of that, but just for the good of the group, that is federally required and required by the state, right? Yes.
That is federally required.
So I guess in summary, like I don't personally have an issue with approving this basically to go to public comment. I think we should do that. The one concern I would voice is that Rodney and I have heard from our board members that they are concerned about the scenario planning. So in doing this, I want for the record, this is not the Spotsylvania staff to that we concur with the scenario plan.
That's fine. We will also ask the public, right? And if the public doesn't like it, or if the FAMPO board doesn't like it, we just pull it out. It's not something that is our decision as staff. We recommend what we think is a prudent best option, and if people don't like it, then people don't like it. That's
Are there any other comments from the group?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that to roll over the monies, we still need the revised FY 25 PWP.
yeah. I was going to ask you about that. I can't amend the current UPWP without going through the whole process again. So it's going to take time.
Okay.
Got to draft it, got to put it out for public comment. Legally, I can't amend the UPWP. So in order to change those numbers, I don't think we did it last year. I don't know.
Now, usually you just have to go 2 years into, but to get it for next year, you'll need to amend current UPWP.
Okay, I'm happy to do it.
Right.
Just warning that it's going to take like 2 months because
Good to
we've
know.
got to
Yeah.
do the 30 days. We've got to draft it, do the 30 days. It's got to be approved for public comment by the policy committee. So there's just a bit of a delay. So the practical effect will be, yes, I'll do it. But by the time you get the approved copy, you'll probably be like 30 days from the end of the financial year. But anyway, I'll do it.
Okay, I'll let them know and keep TMPD.
I can send you the draft. In other words, I can do the draft,
Okay,
send it to VDOT, but it has to go here and then to the policy committee, public comment, then back again.
yeah, if you can just put draft on it somewhere.
I'll do that.
Thank you.
Happy to do that. Hi, Jamie.
So is there a motion to approve the draft UPWP for public comment?
Here you do. I don't think everybody heard you.
Is there a motion to approve the draft UPWP for public comment?
I move.
Okay. Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Then the motion passes.
Thank you.
Okay, so that brings us up to 7B.
And just Chairman, while we're on that last item that we just approved, if anybody does see any errors in the document, or if you see something that you think's not good, please tell us. We're going to bring a revised one back anyway to the next meeting.
Yeah, one quick comment. Could you actually send like a Word document for the UPW TAC Members, that would be easier to like track changes
Sure.
Yeah.
Send you a-
Yeah.
and just give us a deadline.
Yes. Okay.
All right, so we are on the CMAC CR STBG funding adjustments. Dr. John Rideout.
Actually, we want to start off with this. So to kick things off with CMAC STBG, we got a letter basically informing us that we were going to see reductions across multiple fiscal years, starting in FY 26 all the way out to actually a reduction in FY 31 from at least what we previously said is expected. And we're having to kind of get these budgets or revised budget over to VDOT so they can include it within their draft documentation. So if you're ready to the next item. In addition, we also have some other CMAC funding stuff coming into our kind of balance entry as well. So hopefully this will help offset how we have to distribute it, but basically 57 funds are displacing previous CMAC funds for the Brook Station, and that has gone through GWRC. So they are going to slowly work its way back into the CMAC allocation. Next item. Oh, and summary presentation, yes. So that's where we're gonna kind of leave off. So next slide. If you look at the funding reductions across the years, we're actually seeing a bigger hit kind of in FY 26. Effectively, they are removing the funds from FY 25 that we received previously, but it's just hitting in FY 26. So you have 2 years of reduction in that. And then as it moves out, it's remaining fairly consistent across the boards, a little bit increased year to year, but generally speaking, we're going to have to make about half of our cuts in FY 26 and 27, and then it's a little bit more manageable further out. And when I said it's about $2.1 million difference, that's for FY 26 through 30, and then we're having a $200,000 reduction in FY 31 versus what we did previously expected, which is flat on FY 30. Next slide. So walk it back a little bit, because this is going to be important context of how I'm going to move forward dealing with the cuts and constraints. Last spring, we were notified kind of late after our call for projects, actually basically after scoring, that we were going to have an extra $3 million in allocations. And as a result, that resulted in 2 things. One, existing and projects that scored 1, 2 in the call for applications ended up getting an additional $1 million, as well as about $2 million went to projects that would not have received funding in that cycle, but because of the additional funds and the way that the methodology cascades its distribution, they entered into the spreadsheet if they kind of finished or low. So we have about $2 million there that in theory would not have been existing. Now we're going to have to remove a little bit more than $2 million. Next. So the existing projects that received additional funds. So you have Route 1 South Point, I-95 widening, TMA Green Springs. These were all items that were previously on or score merited that went on. Fredericksburg's VCR Trail, again, it was the number 1, 2 projects for active transportation, but they would have received the fundings in FY 30, but they received additional funds kind of as a result of the methodology as well, about $250,000 each. And then we also were able to use that extra funds to accelerate some projects that requested funds to be delivered earlier than the FY 30 ask. So like the service corridors, transit items into Pennsylvania, I think they are 2830 requests for those funds. And so we were able to accomplish that due to those extra funds. Next. Then we had about $1.9 million in projects that typically would not have received funding. Route 1 in Massaponax is kind of asterisk. It would have been a TAC level question because there would have been just less than, I think it was about $60,000, whatever the difference is between here and here, additional funding, about $60,000 that either would have gone to that project, so we would just park $60,000 on it, or we would have said, throw it in the balance entry. It would have been a TAC level decision for that. Route 1 in Coachman Circle kind of came on board. heavy duty buses, Harrison Road interchange. We had a lot of projects that kind of snapped back on, but again, it's a little bit less than our $2.1 million deficit. So that's where we were. So we were actually in a lot better shape as far as absorbing items, but this is what I use as my methodology to kind of start pulling back funds. All right, next slide. So we're rebalancing it. The other thing that was the quirk in the redistribution funds was we had a lot of fragmented dollars. A lot of projects with really small pots of funds, say less than $50,000, less than $100,000, kind of spread over years. And that was just more of a result of us learning about the extra $3 million and how it was applied basically March last year when we had to get an item out. So I didn't optimize or redistribute. It just got whatever the methodology said and left it at that. So I'm going to be cutting from FY 26 and to a lesser extent FY 31. I'm going to be moving money back to FY 41, but I'm not going to be kind of hitting hard. So next. So we do have complications as always. Anytime you have to start removing funds, any project that was in process or recommended for smart scale, I froze. I just left it full as is. So although exit 126 and the Orphan Brew project are now being combined within our items, I am not freezing, moving, redistributing any money with that. And that's a big project. Same kind of goes for the South Point jug handle project. It is left as in. We're not doing anything clever while that's in its recommendation mode. Then I said, okay, those extra projects that we funded that would not have received funding previously, those that finished third or lower in the methodology, I push those automatically as a starting point into FY. That's where the additional new money is coming in for the allocations. We're going to just push those there and start freeing up. I also had to look out for projects with over $250,000 because again, I had to make sure that we reduce as much money in FY 26 as possible. In 27, we have a little gap in our projects in some places. And so if it was a larger project, I think it was Fredericksburg's route 1, route 3 pedestrian bridge. I had to move those into FY 31 just because I can't touch the smart scale projects or projects that are currently underway. That one wasn't, so I was able to move that one back because of its capacity and it's currently underfunded. And then I went into other items. Again, they're cutting more from FY 26. They're kind of leaving FY 25 alone, which is good. So I can kind of use that and move funds between that, particularly CMAQ and STDG. That can actually, in some cases, accelerate a project a little bit. That happened. I think I worked with staff on that just because they were sitting on big pots of funds for those years. So it's a way of not impacting that. So right now, I have not cut a single project. So every project that received funding in the previous iteration of the spreadsheet still has the exact same level of funding. Nobody's getting more, nobody's getting less. It's just when it's happening that's going. So next. So again, 208 has been moved, Levels Road intersection improvement, moved to FY 31, Coachman Circle, Spotsylvania and Route 1. I'm still doing it kind of partial, but it's not going to be able, I can't move enough money to accelerate it or to give it more money earlier to kind of collapse it. So it's either going to be pushed back, but kept into the FY 30 range, or it's always going to have an FY 31 allocation. Transit, the HD bus purchases and new vehicles, I eventually just pushed that out. They're going to have replacement vehicle funds being accelerated. So it's kind of pushed. They're kind of clumped in the middle. I had to push them out to the edges of the spreadsheet. And then the studies and the route, the pedestrian bridges over Route 1 and Route 3. Next slide. So again, this is where I'm kind of cheating a little bit, is that I'm using that CMAQ fund that are just now coming available, as well as less cuts in FY 25 to kind of pull Enon Road as close up as possible. I can't accelerate it. In the first table of that, you have previous years and FY 25 in theory, and now we're just making it all available at that point in time. Ongoing Road was not, that would be a great one, but I was able to program swap because I'm rebalancing FY 26 and 27 in those items. And then Garrisonville Road, I was able to use STDG money, just pull it forward, but I also know that that project's probably looking at some rescoping, looking more intersections. So I'm also just quietly eyeing that one of if and when it becomes available, we can swap it with CMAC because it is close to $800,000 as TVG. And then I collapsed Fredericksburg's bus replacements into the near years rather than pushing out to the far years and push the other projects out. But if Fredericksburg wants to change that, I can always swap those. It's just, I had to move it out of that 26, 27 danger window. All right, next slide. So we created two options. Option one, and I just gave it the label Smart Skill, which questions over that just because the TAC has previously discussed it. But option one is kind of the process where I started off is I clear out as much money, collapse funding amounts, particularly so it's not spread out small amounts each year, as well as try to free up as much STBG as possible so that any project that CMAC allocated uses CMAC first and then STBG is more flexible. And so I can start plugging holes without having to worry about funding sources. So that's what it is. And I gave it the title, Smart Skill Support if you want to use it. We received comment back that is we might need to be looking at more of a cushion, kind of a set aside to deal with potential other cost increases or issues. But we can free up close to $400,000 in FY26, including the cuts, as well as it kind of tapers off into the out years. So it's about $800,000 that we can do it. We don't want to say this is new money that's available to new projects. This is just a large kind of buffer that I created before I started pulling other projects forward. Now, the difference with option two is that I start pulling all those extra projects forward. So the FY31 increase is actually more available in out years because I kind of start bringing it. Next slide. So I'm going to leave that here. You can kind of see the items. The question here about the negative number in the balance entry, I didn't add, that's previous years, I didn't add budget an additional amount because I don't want to kind of artificially say it has even more money in that year. I just added it as a negative, so it's working in reverse from the set aside entry. There's a question of that's just the quirk of the spreadsheet and my ability to track the changes. So it's actually adding an addition because these are all subtractions with allocations. So option one with Smart Skill Support, we have a little bit of leftover remainder carbon reduction funds just because of how the money got shifted and moved, but it's relatively low. And then it's $2.7 million there. And then next slide. Again, I have a little bit more kind of STBG money out down here, but it's $3.5 million left for FY31. And I believe a few of the Spotsylvania projects, I think it was the Massaponax project, is what start kind of getting tugged forward in the difference, as well as the city's Route 1 and Route 3 pedestrian bridges. Those are the two projects that get moved forward, and it's kind of accounting for the differences in the FY31 balance. So, but they're still receiving FY30. They get like FY29 funding, but they're still kind of stretched across that couple of years. So I think that's the last one. Next slide. And I provided the spreadsheets as well as it's color coded, so you can actually see where and what I did to move things. So if you see if a project's highlighted in blue in the funding, that means I've accelerated, kind of crushed it up, again, moving stuff out of the FY26 and 27. Green, kind of, it was a hard lock kept as is. Yellow just means I've consolidated it. It shouldn't be receiving money any further back than its last date that it was going to receive funding. It was just collapsed into 1 or 2 years. And then red means it was pushed back. Also included in this is the long-range transportation plan support with the scenario planning that Ian just mentioned, the $70,000 and $100,000. We also had initially put in that the New Post River crossing. I think that's now being maybe walked back. I'll let the TAC discuss that if they want. But we did put in $20,000 for the modeling support for that. And then last item is that Smart Scale, or if you want to rename it for buffer cost increases, have a bit more of a cushion there. Do that as well, but that's what I labeled it rather than say, look, I have a whole bunch of years that previously didn't have it. And I can also do swaps wants to get that from that, we can do that as well.
So before we do questions, I just want to thank the Fantasy staff for their work on this. I know it's a lot of work in a short amount of time. I just had a couple overview questions on the funding and then just one detail. But in terms of just the amount of funding went down, the 2.1 million approximately, and then we got the 500,000 CMAX, so the net is minus 1.6 million.
No, well, that was allocated CMAQ funds. So the net is still the $2.1 million being removed from our budget.
Because the 500,000 was an actual project.
Yeah.
So that particular project still was there with the 500,000. We are just now able to take it off that project to reallocate it.
It's useful. Like, it's not quite that. It's like quietly killing one of our own projects or something. I agree. Traditionally, what we would have done is then thrown that money out into FY31, which we would have still had a $240,000 deficit out in the out years. It's just now being, okay, we got $200,000 more. And so, yeah, it's the shuffling, but yeah, we're still having to cut 2.1 million out of the $57 million in allocations.
Or you could turn it the other way around and say we're getting less money in 2031, 250,000 less than we would expect.
So I also had just a kind of a question about the yellow consolidated, what that means. And for instance, like if you had a project that has funding in 27, 28, and 29, most of the funding was in 28. Would it consolidate all the money to 28?
I based it on the last year the funding was available, so it would be consolidated into 29. So that's not always the case. In some cases, if it was 27, 28, and 29, if I had to move it from 27, it could be mostly in 28, but I'm not delaying the last dollar any further back than where it was.
On that point, you did a workshop with VDOT. I was unfortunately not here, but some of those VDOT folks are in the room. You got advice from them which projects cannot be moved into different years, and you've kept those in the year that they need to be in, right?
Yes. We work basically say, these are the sensitive projects, please don't touch anything. And these are the ones that you don't see as being quite ready yet based on the ask and the funding available.
So you didn't move any that VDOT said, no, please don't move those.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go to questions. Matthew?
I guess just one comment and one question. John, where possible, I would like to see project number 49, the minor Green Spring, the 327 moved up to FY29, just to match better with our project schedule. I do appreciate the consolidation.
Okay.
And then in regards to number 60, whatever you need that, I would support it. We don't have any contingencies in our plan right now, minimal contingencies. 5,000, about 5,000 CMAQ, 50,000 SPV. Where possible, I would like to see that spread back out into the years. Over the 6-year period, that equals what, 750? We had 820, so I don't know if you can make your magic work on that to line it up like that, but
So you want to use, can we go back more scale? Keep going more. I actually want to use this.
that one.
So you need for Minor Road.
It has 327,000 with 430. So,
Yeah.
and we can move money around here.
Yeah. Because I would just actually year for it. So 325, you have 28. So we can pull for the FY. Do you want to use, and this is including tax feedback, so everybody chime in. I can move some of either these 2 years to make that funds available earlier and then use that, the FY30, kick that down into the balance entry, which we have actually basically nothing in it for that out year. That's what y'all want.
I'll just say the FY30 is a little bit too late. Projects.
Just to remind everybody, we have, apart from these numbers that people are talking about now, the annual set aside that we always keep in reserve is already a separate line item. It's already in, so we have the normal reserve as well already. It's there.
You mean the 75,000?
It goes up, John, just.
It's not
Which
shown on the
down.
spreadsheet.
So it is,
That,
The balance entry.
oh, you're talking about that, okay.
Yeah.
so that,
I see
so,
what you're
so
saying.
that thing that John's calling the balance entry is the set aside.
Okay.
Those other amounts that he's been showing are separate from that completely. The set aside, we don't touch. We only touch it in the year in which it's allocated and then move it on to projects, or else we roll it over to the next year. But that money is in policy and it's staying there.
So like in FY 26, I have to balance it out now. So that's why it's empty there. That's the reason why this is previous years and it's negative. Spreadsheet doesn't like be doing that.
Nick was next.
Yeah, so just want to confirm, John, that this spreadsheet does not include the forthcoming changes to the allocations of CMAC for the.
Actually, it's doing so in anticipation of that
Oh, okay.
money. That's what this.
Oh, that, I was gonna say, that number looks familiar.
Yeah, that is the money. and
Okay.
That's what we're showing is in anticipation of that money basically coming available in this draft that we are then.
Then putting on to, okay, because that negative is actually it's coming out of the balance entry and going to the project.
Mhm.
Okay, good, that's all.
It's even worse because it's so old in the previous year funding that the spreadsheet literally has no capacity other than me artificially bumping up.
Bumping up the number, so, and because I know Christine had sent an email about where, what year that funding out. Did you ever?
It could have been as early as 2017 or 2018, but I don't know how it was moved about in between. I think
It's still there, it's just.
Yeah, it's still there. It's just, this is our budget. and it's allocated.
It's currently there, so when we finally adopt a new spreadsheet, it will then get moved.
Okay.
So right today, the money is still on the project in Brook Road. But as soon as we finish this process and the policy committee adopts a new one, VDOT will take the new one and make the amendments in the system to move it onto projects.
Yeah, you can actually see it's number 8 on it on the spreadsheet. Brook Road station improvements, and you can now see that it has no CMAC funding on it.
Oh,
It
okay.
used to live in that previous year allocation,
Okay,
so.
okay, all right.
Sounds good. Just going around the table, look, are there any other questions? Any questions on the back there? That or anything else? Okay, so, I guess the option we need to make a decision on option 1 versus option 2.
Tell me the changes you want me to make.
And just one quick question. So with the remainder amounts, why are those amounts not up listed in the balance entry?
Because depending on what I need to move, it's still available. It's kind of weird. I didn't add any additional funds to any projects, but when you tend to move things back, you actually tend to free up a little bit more money. But it's basically CMAC
So,
goofiness happening.
so I have a
Carbon
question.
reduction goof.
I have a question on this for VDOT financial people. We are not allocating that 3 point whatever it is million or the 2.7 million or whatever it is in the FY 31 year this round. Because we're going to have a call for projects in September, and then we're going to allocate 2 years of money in March. Where do you want us to put that, the big amount for FY 2030 that we are not allocating? Do we want to just put it in the balance entry, or do we need to put it on I remember in previous years, we created a project called regionally significant projects with UBC number, and we put the money there so that it looked like we had so much money unallocated. But we can also put it in the balance entry. We can do whatever you think is good for VDOT. We don't actually have a strong view. For FY 31, we can put that. For now, we'll put it in the balance entry, and if you find that that's with your overlords, you can tell us, by the way, please do this other thing.
The other minor comment is my understanding is basically that the previous money should be fully allocated. So when we're done with this, the 9614 should be allocated to something.
Yes.
It's just finding a carbon reduction eligible project. And then it's just like, I can throw it to something, but I'll give an extra project $9,000.
So I guess I want to talk a little bit about the option one versus the option two, and there was like that's the suggestion of having at 880,000 for like smart scale studies. Was that a staff idea or who came up with that?
Ian told me that I could not just say that there was $800,000 available. I have to put it to something. I'm like, well, they talked about smart scale, so put that down.
So I guess the thought that we at Spotsylvania had that basically was with the new methodology, when basically applicants get the STBG, they want to use some of their STBG for like smart scale studies, they can do that. But we don't think it's a good idea to have just like a project for smart scale studies. So we would prefer option two.
I think, well, yeah, I'd support that as well, just leaving the money in a balance entry. In the out year.
In the out, in FY 31, yes, we leave the money in the balance entry.
I think it's just, I'll just note again, my concern with minor concern project and money out in FY 30.
Okay.
Wanted to do what we can to move that money up.
Pathway to do that with option one, even if it's not considered a option three, like modify it and have a balance entry balance moving forward.
Fine if it's an FY 30 is.
Projects that are advanced in option two are the one Massaponics project and a PCR trail options.
Is it possible to swap that project's?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we can do that. That will help solve Matthew's problem.
That work for you, Matthew? Okay,
Just, I'll note the messaging. to-
I'll be back out with you. Show you how to.
So there's one change. And then there's the discussion about whether or not, which of the two options is the preferred option. With that change that we can do with one Stafford project to another Stafford project, that shouldn't affect anyone else.
So we don't have an issue with what Matthew suggested. I did want to talk a little bit more just about the money for support.
Yes.
My question is with the 170, like with the 100,000 of that, for FY 27, didn't that go in the FAMPO STBG set aside, the number one project?
We care. Yeah, could avoid us doing an extra UBC.
Yeah, our preference would be to do that. And then for the scenario
Okay.
planning, that's kind of like a new initiative. I'll say that our board members have some concerns. I don't want the TAC to take action on that, just to basically give that to the policy committee. I set that 70,000 aside if the policy committee wants to do that. Can we put it? So,
Perhaps we can-
Frankly, we could do if they want to do the scenario planning, we could do the same thing that you're just suggesting, because it effectively leads to the LRTP. So we could call it bundled, producing chapter 5 of the next LRTP could be so we could make the case to just put it in the same line item. It avoids getting a new UBC, but we'll explain to the policy committee what it's for and let them decide if they want to do it or not.
well, I guess what I would say is if the policy committee is okay with it, I think it makes perfect sense. I mean, just for what goes to the policy committee, I'm suggesting that 100,000 go in FY 27 for the
Yes,
FOS to be set aside.
that's fine.
But yeah, the 70,000 just be kind of in the balance entry, and then the policy just makes a decision on whether or not to advance that.
And I heard the discussion of the phone, but what is the issue with $70,000 about having, is it a messaging issue so that if it's bundled with, or is it the
So-
fact that it's not required?
Yes, the concern is that this is not a requirement.
Okay.
And there's concern just in a lean year kind of spending $70,000 on a new initiative. which they don't necessarily support.
Okay.
So, yeah, Paul's right. There've been some comments from Spotsylvania members that they're not wild about scenario planning. But there have some comments from the city, and not sure about staff that we should, or Matthew, anyway, it says
Staff, my comments, staff.
staff and staff that are interested, and city policy committee members are definitely interested. They said so at the last meeting. So I think Paul's just saying we don't have unanimous support, so let's just get the policy committee to make it.
Okay.
And that's fine. It's not my preferred option that we remove chapter 5 from the LRTP, but that is legally an option.
I just wanted clarification as to why there's an objection.
Yeah.
Matthew?
One other item, with regards to the LRTP scenario planning and modeling, there was two falls ago, we were doing the updated model. So when we were finalizing the updated model, I had requested to redo the land use assumptions, and there just wasn't enough time, and the need to potentially come back to that now, 2055. So just wanted to get that. And that's where the scenario plan went. Population. So overall spread land use. For instance, Alexander Crossing doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
In most, there's some stuff getting built there, but that TAZ still has several thousand residences. I don't know how much plan. That's same thing in Stafford. This does. So to do what we can to make those updates for this LRTP and spend the money on. Doesn't have to be scenario planning. It should be a model update in that case. But spend the money to update those.
Can you go back to the last slide? I know that this is a question that everyone's dying to know. Where did you,
Yes.
where did you get the picture of the bouncing cat?
Cat meme Google. I'm like, my thing is like, I just looked for a photo that defied physics with a cat. So that's what
John has got this really fun sense of humor, and he's always looking for these things, and sometimes he puts them in the slides.
I think it needs to be a gift. Yeah.
That's what when they converted from PowerPoint to PDF, it removes the animations. Don't worry, there's a few that are like that. In fact, there's one that showed it.
Like legs retracting like like an aircraft.
That could be hilarious.
But my favorite one was like a small little like, I don't know, warrior with us riding the back of it, cowboy, like.
So just to get this thing finality, we don't have guidance on which of option 1 and option 2 we should be proceeding with. Paul has made comments, and can we just get, are you saying that that's what you?
Make a motion to board with option 2 with the change of moving money from minor bring on Garrisonville swap.
And the
And the
movement of the
Right.
STGP.
So we're leaving $70,000 out.
Yeah. One other minor friendly amendment is just basically with that previous CRP money, the 96, try to fully allocate that.
The small remainder money.
Yeah, try to make that.
It's coming, so what I'm running into with carbon reduction is having an eligible project in the years that can make use of it with keeping budget, their numbers flat. Like I have projects that can use it, it's just gonna result in a $5,000 increase for a few. Depending on which years it's hitting.
There's no STBG swap.
Well, again, I've swapped it.
I see.
The trick is it's carbon reduction. We didn't always have carbon reduction FY 26, so the number of eligible projects is a little bit hit and miss. So replacement buses might be eligible, but I'll still like tie it in. Because I might put a vehicle type restrictions on it. So.
Yeah, the thought I had on that is basically just, let's say surplus in FY 27 that goes to the balance entry. Yeah, other minor thing, well, I guess.
You want me to say zero it out? I'll zero it out. Okay.
The other point that I forgot to make, I made this. Let's go with the resources we're costing our board members have to be concerned with doing that, so that money maybe could go to the downtown.
I'm gonna ask this month, I'm gonna ask the policy committee to just make a formal decision
Yeah.
on that, so that I can record it in the minutes and then remove him from all of that. That's no problem. Because it'll also affect my UPWP numbers. Right. So I'll need to take it off there too. But if Swatsy just says that in the meeting and we all agreed, then I'll just do it.
Any other comment?
Get
So
some,
motion with friendly amendment, any other discussion? Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes. Thank you.
so we will present only option 2 with all of those changes that you've suggested. Thank you.
Right. Okay, so this brings us to item 7C, still on CMAQ CRFPG. This is the initial draft of the methodology, also with Dr. John Rideout.
John's done a lot of work on TMAC and STGB in the last 2 weeks, I can promise you.
Ian promised me in November, like I was have no CMAC STPG work at all.
We didn't expect to have all this money taken away.
Famous last word.
Yeah, I know.
I,
Thinking about animated GIF, this is moving.
before he starts, there is some pressure to allocate the funding that we've just spoken about. There is no pressure to finish this methodology in a hurry, right? There's really no pressure. As long as we get it done by September, it's fine. So if you still want to send us amendments or whatever, we're not asking for anybody to approve anything now. This is a draft that John's going to show you, and feel free to ask for amendments and change. We can accommodate that because there really is no timeline pressure. September is when we have to have it done.
Yes, there is, because I want to get this done. So I'm worried about it in summer. I don't run back into it.
Okay, for John's mental health over the summer, there is some pressure.
If I may, we should try to get this done in a few months rather than letting it drag out.
No, I'm assuming we will get it done in the next 2 months. But I'm just saying there's no crisis here, there's no pressure.
Let's zip through this one quickly. So next, just a reminder, this is what the policy committee selected. It is a population, urbanized population composite, and that is going to be showing up mostly those changes in section 5.1. All right, next. We are updating basically the entire table of contents with the exception of number of applications because that being the items that are happening in this upper column here are mostly the administrative, just bringing the language into alignment with the methodology and or streamlining the fact that it's STBG and CMAQ in the same document. So you will see basically sections lifted from the STBG and deposited in the CMAQ document. And then for the methodologies based on the new allocation, that's where you're seeing the biggest changes happening. It's actually starting at project 3.3. Much of section 4 is being removed and major addition or modifications are happening in section 5. Next slide. Again, keeping the same number of applications, screening criteria, and timeline. Those aren't changing. So we're still going to have the capacity for folks to submit, revise, work their projects into, if it's not meeting a requirement, to actually have time to go back and revise it to bring it in alignment with the requirements. And so we'll still have those wonderful December meetings when you're trying to get out for vacation, where you have to sit down with myself and Ian and just kind of walk through each one of the projects. So we're keeping kind of that bit of the process the same. So those are things. The other thing that we're keeping the same is, let's just say, Paul, you just decided we're not going to submit any projects. Well, the allocation that would be Spotsylvania's allocation will be redistributed in the funds. We're keeping that element that if you don't submit it, you don't just park the money. You have to submit something to be able to those funds. So if you forget, it's going to be a hard explanation because those would then be redistributed. We'll work with you to a lesser extent to make sure that everything is submitted, but we're keeping that language in the document. Next.
There's a question.
Yeah, so
Yes.
procedurally, if we wanted to put several allocations worth of funding on a project, let's say a new project, we would, in year one, submit that project you know, knowing that it's only gonna get a fraction of its total, you know, required balance, and then submit, you know, let's say 3 or 4 rounds, then at that point, we have the sufficient funding to.
And we'll be doing this in 2-year rounds, so we'll be submitting for,
We might only have to do it twice or 3 times.
so we'll work with the jurisdictions and the applicants to make sure that if you submit for FY 31, that you don't also forget to submit for FY 32, unless that was a cognizant choice that you're not submitting in that year. But if we're not filling up a pot, we're gonna reallocate. So if you decide to sit on it, it's not just we're gonna sit on money for you in the out years, you have to.
Okay.
So what we have updated, again, minor language items, and we provided the red line document as well as a clean version, linked to TAC. Section 5 is where we're updating the new methodology with the application composite formulas and metrics. We are also updating the language to cost increases, saying that, hey, you got to swallow your own cost increases. There's not going to be extra money kind of in the balance or reserve for that, because it's done by formula. And new and previous rounds of new funding if it becomes available. So we'll still go by the method if all of a sudden we have $3 million new in a given year. Reductions will probably handle it in a different way, but we'll come at that. And then much of section 4 is removed, but because we have multiple potential applicants for transit funds, we're actually keeping the scoring considerations just so that we have a process that will come before TAC and policy committee in case there's.
Did everyone get that? Because it's a wrinkle, but you need to think about that. We're not scoring any of the projects from localities, but we are scoring transit projects because there may be, let's say VRE asks for another amount of money for a station upgrade, and Fred applies for new rolling stock for buses. That might occur in the same year, and then we have to competitively score those projects.
Actually, that would be an asterisk, even in that wrinkle. So if it is a regional transit project, it can be potentially scored against it. If it's for one jurisdiction only, we'd expect the transit entity.
Ah, yes. Sorry, yes, you're right.
So it'd be like rolling stock, like if two entities.
So if
rolling stock.
Bob Schneider wants a bus and Jamie wants a bus, we have to then score them competitively. Sorry, my bad.
So, yeah, I know it's a weird wrinkle, but you're correct. It is a very long one. But so we have most of section 4 removed, active transportation studies, roadway, that's now gone. Transit remains. And it also has for alternative fleet carbon reduction, because in theory it still exists, but next. Do you have any questions? Okay. I would recommend
Flying cats.
let me know if you have any changes or notice of issues with the red line version or clean version or any conflicts you're seeing. Yes.
And just one kind of overview comment before we go to specific questions. Can you give us like a deadline, maybe when you need comments on this? I was thinking maybe a couple weeks.
Yeah, I would say before the next TAC meeting, that'd be horrible.
Not 3 days before the TAC meeting. So like we need
3 weeks. Let's go for 3 weeks.
3 weeks from now would be good.
Okay.
Then it gives us a week to at least process the request.
And could you please just send out an email to the TAC members, just request.
Yeah.
Matthew.
John, I missed the presentation, but the percentages, Stafford applied, do we need to retain the 15%, or in the TMA specifically, for instance, do we need to retain the percentages? Or can we
So-
negotiate it?
Again, sorry, walk that back again. Sorry, that last little
So
comment.
the percentages, so the TMA money, for instance, comes from, the prior methodology would have been percent for transit, percent for active transportation. Can we apply for roadway?
In the current document,
That current methodology is still required to go to the transit or active.
and he's left that section in the document. So currently, yes, the Stafford TMA still needs to go to either transit or bike ped projects. It's up to the county to decide projects to pick. That's the way it is now.
Can I please request clarification? The policy committee. Perhaps that you will
Will.
discuss that with policy committee and verify what they're.
We'll tell them that that is the current status of that particular item.
So,
Just one kind of general comment, like, with the application process. County wants more funding for an existing project. Is it a easier application process versus a new project?
it should be a,
Cost estimate might change, but the other documents, if the project hasn't changed, if the scope is the same, then the rest of the items, we probably have it on file on the computer, so you won't have to resubmit the same document again.
Right.
But you will just need to update the cost
Actually-
estimate if there's a change to the
the
cost.
still key would be just submitting that Word file and just making sure you have the money available that you're requesting. It's almost, that Word file is now going to change from like a competitive thing to just us looking at the financial numbers for that year to make sure that you're totaling up to this total number of requests. I'm not expecting all jurisdictions to use the 5 applications up CMAQ STBG, because you're cutting the funds up 5 times. You're eligible to do so, but I don't want a situation where we're dividing it across 10 projects. But I'm thinking that you don't have to fill all 5 application slots anymore if you don't want to. So if you only have 2 projects that are your priority, submit for those. I'm going to be looking at that Word file just for the amount of requested for both projects equals the total amount of funds that the formula requires. And we're going to let you know that ahead of time. So once we know about the formula, so that it can be done. And that's going to be probably a little, VDOT has any March tweaks to the funding available. We'll reflect that, but we'll be looking at that just so you're making sure that you're submitting properly. You want to say all the funds on one project?
So in terms of the timeline, just think about the logic. In September-ish, we're going to put out a call for projects for you to give us the projects, right? Because our job then is to validate that those projects meet the federal, legal, and state requirements. So does it actually improve air quality? Does it actually improve congestion? So we've got to do those calculations. That is still required. We still have to do. You won't yet know how much money VDOT is going to give us for that second year in March, right? We don't actually know the dollar value yet. So the idea is you send us projects that you're thinking about putting money in. So that, in other words,
Actually, I might change the application. Instead of asking for how much money, asking what percentage of your total you want. So if you want to put like 60% on South Point and 100% on,
I don't even
do it.
I don't like disagreeing with John in the meeting, but I don't even care about that because we are not going to allocate the money. We will, when VDOT gives us the money, it'll take us one day to do the calculation. We'll send you a sheet saying this is the amount of money you have to allocate. Now tell us where you want to put the money. But that will come second. Step 1 is please give us your list of projects together with the materials we need to perform the due diligence and check that it meets the standard of CMAQ. That's what we're going to do first. The exceptions will be for transit projects that we have to get the other details as well, because we may have to competitively score the transit projects. So we get all of that from you September, October-ish. We then, John and his team will do screening in. Do these projects meet the legal requirements? We'll then send you the information or feedback to say, yes, your project's all screened in. Then there's a bit of a wait, except for the transit projects, which we'll score. There's a bit of a wait, and then we get information from VDOT in about March to say this is what the allocation is for the next round. We then add the 2 amounts together, the amount we've parked this year plus the new amount. We divide it up according to the methodology. We send you a list saying these are the allocations in dollars. You then go and talk to your jurisdiction and decide where you want to put the money. Then you send us back a reply saying, here's where we want to put the money. And in the case of transit, it's basically the old method. And then we compile that, bring it to the TAC, and then take it to the policy committee, and then the policy committee decides whether they're going to adopt it.
As of right now, we still need to stay within all the percentages, right?
As of right now.
Just one question, just about the modal administration. Sorry, I didn't clarify that. The amount of highway versus transit versus like that. Aren't we required to give something to bike cut and the transit, like, it can't be zero for that. Everything from highway.
Are you saying that
I will need to check the CMAC legislation to answer that question, because I don't know.
in theory we're covered, if it's CMAC, we're still covered because we're doing an allocation for both, GWR Connect and the 7.5 transit allocation. For STBG, we still have the requirements for Stafford County that has to go to active transit requirements. So.
Well, that, I mean, that's a part of my, are we required to do that in the first place?
But if Stafford, if we remove that requirement from Stafford, then we don't have any STGB money necessarily going to transit.
And I'm not talking just Stafford, I'm talking about just the general percentages that go to other jurisdictions.
So if I may, Mr. Chair, could we just park this and do the research properly, consult with people that, high up the food chain about what the legislation requires? Then we can come back with a proper answer, because in the last policy committee, I misspoke and gave the policy committee wrong information on something because I didn't check the document. So to avoid doing that again, I suggest we just go and get the chapter.
BG is completely loose, so I don't think we have it. Question is CMAC and whether or not we get our, due diligence with set asides. However, that's also dependent on which projects jurisdictions wish to pursue, because if one jurisdiction wants to put all through roadways, the other one wants to do it in active, don't have an issue. It's a question of all three would potentially do roadways.
But hypothetically, if that does happen 1 year, we need to just check what the law says. It may be that we're required to put something to do.
So there's no action required today, right?
No action required today. We're waiting to hear whether anybody has any changes. We'll do a shortened version of this presentation to the policy committee just for information purposes, telling them that we are working on it. The TAC will bring them a further updated presentation next month, or some words to that effect. But there's no pressure, time pressure on this one.
I mean, this is just a suggestion, but just for policy committees, well, future tax, maybe just have a little schedule of just kind of
Timeline.
my timeline for when we're hoping to finish this up and to allocate funding in the fall.
That's fine. We'll do.
Thank you very much for your work. That's.
Well done, John.
Okay, so that brings us to 7D, V-Trans needs update with Carrie Eves.
Okay, so V-Trans priorities confirmed. So this is just a discussion of topics from two different presentations that I've seen recently. One was given at the last Commonwealth Transportation Board meeting. And the other one was, Paul, thankfully passed along to me. It was from the Cost Estimation Summit. Which was cost estimates and round observations. So we have eligible V-Trans needs to the 3 travel markets. You're all pretty familiar with these. It's just a review. We've got the CSF, RN, and UDAs and economic development areas. So localities are eligible for all 3 of these, but PDAs and UDAs are only eligible for the first 2. One thing to make sure of is that all of the localities need to make sure that they have updated their UDAs and their economic development areas with WIGI, and that's a map of the current ones in our area. Okay, so the presentation was on modifying the V-Trans need category weights, which they did for all of the area types except for ours. And at first I was like, why did they do that? Well, apparently ours already matched the factor weights that they were using. So why am I here? The reason I'm here is because they were talking about the V-Trans needs are categorized as priority locations 1 through 4. All of these, if you have one of these, you qualify for Smart Scale. You can do a project for Smart Scale. Policy requires that any capacity expansion solutions are only in V-Trans priority 1 locations. So if you want to do a road widening or something, it needs to be in a priority 1 location. Project pipeline is generally only priority 1, priority 2. When I was listening to the meeting, Secretary Miller spent a long time stressing that this has nothing to do with project scoring funding, just study dollars. Kept saying. Next slide.
Carrie,
Yes.
I mean, doesn't it impact the eligibility though for projects? Apply for like the HPP?
To apply for HPP, well, it's, I mean, anything that has a V-Trans need. But COSS are, you know this, like
Yeah.
HPP, is different. I'm talking about for all the locality folks too. Only has to be. It turns out that 80% of the projects were on priority 1, 2. 96% of the HPP were on priority. So my point here is that he said it has nothing to do with it. However, it seems to correlate pretty strong, which is significant. And I want us all to think about this, like how many of our regional TAC priorities that are unfunded currently that we're thinking about doing in the future, how many of them are at priority 1 or 2 locations? That's our first question that I want us to think about as a region. The next one that we really need to think about is how well do the current performance-based planning metrics for V-Trans, how well do they capture our regional priorities, especially for bike safety or uncommon situations such as new roads. Next. So, and another thing. We used to go to V-Trans needs meetings. Last one they held was pre-COVID, right? 2018, 2019, exactly when it was. But we no longer have meaningful input on V-Trans. So they are, you know, they're determining what the V-Trans needs are going to be without any real input from us. And these are the foundational metrics for pipeline, for new capacity development, for smart scale scores. And I think it's important that they're developing the participatory and so the metrics used to determine these needs are on slide 8, which is the next slide. Yeah, but if you're going to be making comments to OIB, and I think we should find some good way to do that, they should be referred to extensively in doing that. Some of the examples that I've been thinking about as, first of all, has your locality corrected that you reported your UDAs, your IEDAs, needs for those things to OIB? I know that, for example, Matthew received a letter to update his UDAs and make sure that all of his needs were correct. Has everybody else done that? Are there regional network needs for pedestrian and bike access to activity centers? Reflecting what's on the ground in your jurisdiction. I have noticed, I don't necessarily think that, so think about. And I personally feel like that affected their smart scale projects. Do the metrics under goal A for regional networks and COSS reflect appropriately on your roadways? And my other question about HPP projects, why can't they use the statewide pedestrian? Or some any of these questions are something you might think about. So just think you need to pay attention to this. The next slide, over here. Next slide. Oh, yeah. You don't have to go over it, but take a look at these metrics. These are what they're using. I just want to bring this up to everybody today as we go into round 7. So we can really just make sure that we at least are minding what we can take care of, and then maybe bring this up about determining future trends.
So I had a couple comments, just in terms of just the feedback. And I think by all means, the example of GWC should give some feedback. But it'd be much stronger if like the Virginia Association of NPOs made the point collectively. But I completely agree with you. It used to be that this came around to the different regions of the state to get input on the V-Trans needs. And given that it's so tied to smart scale now, it seems odd that they're not still doing that. So yeah, if Anthony could give comment on that, I think that would be terrific. The other question I had is just with congestion data. I know like Route 208, and I think 610 is the same situation. I'm not sure other major roads in the region that are like this, in 207 or 301, but the state isn't collecting congestion data on those. So it's not, congestion data is not properly showing up. So when Rodney and I were coming here from the office up 208, we came into basically Smith Station in Foster. 208 going in towards the city was backed up like maybe a half mile.
Yeah.
And just the signal kind of at Foster and 208, it only had like 20 seconds of green time. I timed it for like 208 mainline, and it was terrible backup. But on 208 all the time, like when we drive it or the board members drive it, I know Matthew talked about it the last time, traffic is terrible. But when you look at like smart scale, it says there's just no congestion.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Right, so these places don't have the trans leads, and you can look on the ground and say.
Matthew.
I guess two comments, just one, nice part is that doesn't actually affect our scoring, it just affects if we're eligible to apply. So it's kind of something that's lingering, we pushed on it in the past with OIP, gotten nowhere. Maybe what we can request FAMPO do, add a line item to the UPWP to do the midterm needs analysis for congestion, follow the same methodology OIP uses on all roads that aren't on the TMC segments, do for the XD segments and inlets, and see what other roads could have congestion. I don't know if there will be any. Garrisonville, I did the math and it was close to qualifying. I wasn't sure if it would or would not, but would be interesting to see if there are any. I think that, to Paul's point, would actually give back up to our request for them to add those needs. Right now, it's just, hey, we want you to do this. We don't have any data to show that they would actually qualify for congestion.
Refresh my memory if someone can, because I do remember those meetings when OIP was reviewing the V-Trans needs with the entire state. And what was the threshold for a roadway segment to be considered congested? It was based on like minutes of delay,
Yeah.
street flow or something like that?
Eugene, can you go back to the metrics slide? Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
So you can make that a little bigger.
Oh, I see up in the upper left right there.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so
Yes,
there's,
there are metrics in there.
They have a technical documentation. Explains a little bit.
This is from that, it's like a policy guide for V-Trans that you can look in to see all the metrics.
Yeah.
Like the quantitative way that they figured it out.
because I know like there was a lot of conversation back in 2018, the I-81 contingent was concerned that a lot of segments of I-81 weren't included on that, but technically it wasn't congested, even though when it does incur an issue, it's a major issue. And so they were kind of trying to thread that needle of like, more like issue mitigation or like crash mitigation than actual like lane widening and stuff.
Well, I kind of wonder, like, these metrics don't capture all of the problems.
I was
Maybe
gonna
there needs
say,
to be another metric.
they draw them fairly limited. I get that they don't want to have 16 metrics to, you know, measure congestion, but
But I feel like overall, there needs to be.
Oh,
Yes.
just quick, so are we going to add your comment to the UPWP? Before we get too far past it, I thought it was a good comment, so. In fact, but the other question I have, we can go back to that comment, but you said for Fredericksburg that we need to,
So I just have some questions about Fredericksburg that I left.
with Fredericksburg or with Boise?
With, I have some questions for OIB about Fredericksburg, about whether pedestrian safety is being.
Okay, can you follow up with us once you have an answer? Because I was taking notes while you were talking, so I missed past that point, so I wanted to make sure. And who do we contact to check on our UPAs of that update that you mentioned?
Oh, yeah, that would be wonderful. Yeah.
Matthew, would you like to make your suggestion
Yeah.
to UWP to Ian?
And so just, I think we were circling back on the suggestion that we, under congestion mitigation, do the analysis for INRIX. Right now, ORP only uses TMC segments, which is Route 17, Route 3, I-95 and Route 1. I think so. It's all different in our region.
So for additional roads in the region where there's no.
Yeah, so use XD segments and INRIX to do that. Right now, we're only uses TMC segments. It should be a pretty quick effort. Doesn't necessarily have to be everything. You could probably do it next few months if you wanted to, but just a suggestion. Because to Nick's point, I don't know if any of our roads will qualify, but I'd like to see if any do and how close they are to qualifying.
But I agree, I think we should have more meaningful input at the local and at the transit agency level. I assume they haven't updated the V-Trans needs document in a while, or they have, and we hadn't,
That document.
okay.
Please, going to update the needs again.
Yeah, I thought they were updating it now. I thought it was gonna be like next month.
No, no,
Next
next
year.
year.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the
They're-
update that you have?
This was just to update the, metric weights,
Okay.
so that they would match the smart scale.
And the 2023 document online, I believe is exactly the same or very similar to 20. So they've updated this.
They ought to include, or they ought to have a process to include like they did before, I don't see why not.
I don't know why the decision was made, not.
So just to give you some response to this idea about Vampo putting in some communication. Vampo has got a draft letter and they're making a slightly different point. The first draft of the letter I've seen. The letter is to say that Vampo is unhappy with OEP and the CTB's process of developing the small scale handbook, whatever it's called, technical guide, because a workshop occurred, I'm told, I wasn't there, so I don't know, but I'm told there was a workshop with VAPDCs and other state level organizations that had an opportunity to give input. And that workshop, no MPOs were invited to, and Vampo was not invited to. So Vampo is concerned that they were never given opportunity to comment on the technical guide. That's not the same as the discussion points that we've been talking about, input on the V-Trans needs. It's about the technical guide and the fact that it made major changes and that no MPOs were consulted, Vampo wasn't consulted. And there really wasn't an opportunity at the CTB for MPOs to give comment, just public comment on the technical guide before it was approved. They changed it so many times through various iterations at their December meetings, January meetings, and so on. And we were not invited to give comment. The need here that I'm hearing is the MPOs didn't have any input on the needs process, which is a separate thing. So are you suggesting that I asked Vampo to add that to this letter?
Yes. I would say that both points are very worthy points. So the existing Vampo point is very good.
Is everybody happy with that?
When does Vampo meet again?
So Vampo meets, well, we have a board that meets on a schedule, and then we have a kind of, forget what it's called, but a Friday sharing group that meets monthly. So I don't have the dates. I can look them up for you, but it's fairly soon. It's like monthly, the one and the other.
Yeah, I
one.
just wondered if
Like-
how long until they get the draft letter.
So I've got the first draft, but now people have asked for changes, and now I'm going to go and ask for another change. So I don't know.
I guess the one thing I'll note, the response more than likely would be, we have not updated it in 4 years. That's why.
What
V-Trans.
needs, the needs list, because V-Trans is more than just a needs list. So
Right, they haven't updated the needs list for many years. So that's gonna be the responses. We haven't updated it, that's why you. I think to my understanding is they didn't change the methodology. They just reran the numbers. That was it.
So
So that's why there was no
the,
feedback.
so there are two different things. The one is to change the metrics, and the other one is to change the need list. Those are two different things. So they're connected, but they're not the same thing.
They didn't touch it, so that's fine.
There are different needs, the needs are different. You compare the maps of needs, there are different.
Yeah, they read the numbers. The actual methodology and everything. Different. How they go. So that's what I'm saying, that's why there might not have been any. The responses is. That's confusing. Fortunately.
So do we want,
No,
Mr.
I think
Chair?
it's a good question to ask still.
It's still, we
No.
can still say that.
Oh, wait, I want to just clarify if that's okay with everyone. Do we want input on the methodology, or do we want any input on the needs list itself? The list of needs for our region, which of those things?
So I think both. I'm at,
Another question, just on the capacity expansion, where did you find that? 'Cause I know,
That was in the board meeting and it's. on the
Okay.
slides.
so I know like we applied, and I think Paul had one last round, round 3, for widening projects last round. Wasn't any issues having those qualified.
Yeah.
And then
Seemed like they was followed.
in round 5, Garrisonville technically was qualified for funding, removed for other reasons. So
That's what was said. And I think it's they are required to focus and prioritize,
yeah, not required to actually.
but like, it's not like set. We sent out questions.
so thank you, Carrie, very much for your presentation. We'll continue on. I know we actually still have a number of items to do, and we're trying to finish it by 11:30. So that brings us to 8 correspondence.
So this letter, there's nothing we have to do about it, but it's just a letter from the Department of Conservation and Recreation for Virginia. They sent us their response to the river crossing, and then we asked our consultant to give a summary. So their summary is that light blue over there. There's nothing we need to do about it right now, but just to show you that the environmental issues are being taken very seriously, and that we are liaising with both federal and state bodies on the environmental issues in the river crossing. So there was a meeting held with all of the environmental stakeholders, both at federal and state level. And this was the response from Virginia to that state level meeting. And as you can see from our consultant, there are resources in the area that need to be investigated with on-site visits, and the full NEPA process on this project is conducted by presumably VDOT. So this is really, by the way, VDOT, here's the thing from the state which says these are the things to look out for when you do the full NEPA certification. Those are the answers that they want. There's nothing particular for us to do now, and it doesn't seem to be prohibitive of any of the options we've got that we're considering. It only says that different options we might choose have different levels of need to investigate with the certification process. So if you choose option A, these are the things you need to investigate. If you choose option D, these are the things you need to investigate. It's a slightly different emphasis depending on where the crossing of the river occurs. All of them will need some NEPA level study, but again, there doesn't seem to be any comment that's prohibitive. There's some mussels on the rocks that need to be investigated, and there's some zones which need to be investigated to check whether certain species are identified, whether they will be impacted, and so on. Some of this, remember, was done anyway when VDOT built the I-95 bridges. So that's already a partial investigation of the area. The further west you go, the further away from the VDOT bridges you are, and the more intense you need to those features. Just giving it for information.
Thank you very much, Ian. That brings us to number 9, staff. Pardon me. Staff reports.
Becky might have stepped out to arrange lunch for you all, so I'll just do this one. You know, we sent in our application for both a further planning study and for an implementation grant. We then received information back from Federal Highways to say that we had been granted the funds for the planning study, but not for the implementation grant. We were then sent a draft contract. We completed our portion of the contract and sent it back to Federal Highways. And then they just went quiet. The new administration was elected and sworn in and took over, and it just went quiet. So we operated on the assumption that this is all going to be stopped, that they're going to cancel this program, and our grant has been cancelled along with it. Although no one's ever told us that it's been stopped. They just never signed the contract. So it's still there hanging. And then suddenly this pops out and we get formally notified that there's a new round of funding, call for projects, call for applications for planning and implementation grants. So I emailed our contact at Federal Highways and I said, well, oh, I thought this has all come to an end. And I was told, no, it's not come to an end. We can apply again, which is real strange, right? So now we're in the situation of, I really don't know what to do, because on the one hand, all they have to do is put their signature on the contract and send it to us, and we have a live project to do work in Spotsylvania. On the other hand, maybe we have to apply again for that same project. I don't know, but in view of the fact that they have not cancelled the program and that they are calling for projects, I've asked Becky to do some research into potential ideas we can apply for, because if they're going to hand out funding, why shouldn't we get some of it? So that's the status of it now. Happy to take any comments from you all as to what you think we should do, but that's where we are.
So Ian, are we even in a position to potentially apply, given that we haven't started the study?
Yes, I asked, and we can apply.
Apply for what?
Your guess is as good as mine. So there's planning and demonstration grants, and there are implementation grants. The implementation grants, I mean, Becky will give you the chapter and verse, but basically our implementation grants failed because they were not convinced of two things. The one is that there is a serious, that the crashes resulted in deaths, and they were counting deaths. And we didn't have enough deaths basically on the roads that we applied for an implementation grant for. And second of all, they're not convinced that wedge widening and shoulder widening and all that jazz is actually going to make the roads safer, for the simple reason that they say that if you do that, the average speed of the cars on that road will go up. So they're not convinced. So my response is, but you put that as an option in the grant documents in the NOFO for us to apply for. Now you're telling us that that particular one doesn't actually work. My response is, well, then why do you put it in the document if we shouldn't have, do that? But anyway, so our implementation grants failed because you need to pick locations where someone has died, not locations where there have been crashes, is my understanding of what they look for. And certain infrastructure they do not think actually is going to reduce the crashes. It might actually increase them because of that example I just gave. But we could apply for another planning grant if we want to study a particular road or a particular set of roads, or we could apply for an implementation grant if you have a roadway where there's been deaths on the road, is my understanding of where we are. Again, there's the added wrinkle of the fact that the new administration may not be looking for the deaths. They may be looking for a broader range of things. I don't know, because we haven't heard from the new Secretary of Transportation what his plans are. But they put out the NOFO, so I assume he's good with calling for applications.
When's the deadline?
They're in the document there. It's June. Yeah, end of June. So we've got time, but I would encourage you all to consult your jurisdictions, and if you want us to apply as a group for a thing, we'll happily do it again. With all the same wrinkles of last time, we'll try to avoid those.
What projects were applied for last time again?
So we had three, the planning grant was awarded for a study of 3 roadways in Spotsylvania where there are some safety needs. And then we applied for an implementation grant for some in Caroline County, some in Spotsylvania County, if I'm not mistaken, and some in Stafford County. I haven't memorized the details, but at least those 3 jurisdictions. They were mostly infrastructure, and that's the other comment they made. What about the educational side of it? Are we not going to have a program of the high schools to tell people this is how to drive safely on these dangerous roads? Are we not going to put up signage, and are we not going to educate drivers to drive safely on those roads, etc.?
So this is just like an idea in Spotsylvania, but like at Tidewater Trail, like Route 217 in Columbus Way. We've had a thing, like industrial fatality in the last few years, and 1 serious injury, and basically the traffic signal there. VDOT is putting in a temporary signal. But like, would that be a good project for this program?
That would probably be the best project.
If you have actual fatalities, they definitely are interested in an implementation grant for fatalities. There are some in Caroline County too. Haven't spoken to Caroline, but I know that they have some fatalities on some roads there that we could look at.
There's no location in Stafford County that's the highest concentration of deaths in the same time frame as that.
But yeah, I mean, if the only thing you can guarantee is that if you don't apply, you will get no money. That's the only thing we know for absolute certain.
Let's move along. So the next one is the TAP and revenue sharing application timeline.
Yeah, so as you saw, the typo we've changed. You've got until the 30th of May, and full applications are August 15th.
So say September 15th. Full applications due by September 15th.
Oh, yeah.
Is that also wrong? Okay, let's change that to September 15th. Nothing we need to do about that right now, just alerting everybody. 6.
So with the TAP applications, will the MPO need to approve TAP applications as has been the case for previous years?
Yeah, we sent in
Okay.
support.
There's a minor green screen project. Okay, that.
The 6-year plan public meeting.
So there's the date, the venue, the time, and we've got an email from VDOT that confirms that again. So you may have all received it as well. That's when it is. So start working towards, and if you want, if you from your jurisdiction or from your transit partner wish to speak at it, you're welcome to come and make public comments. And if you wish any of your elected officials to make comments, please encourage them. Often they say, yes, I'll go, but then they look to me for like talking points. So if you have locality specific talking points or whatever, please give it to your elected officials.
This FYI, we have a board meeting at 5 p.m. that day, so I don't know.
I mean, you may wish to ask one of, somebody to go on behalf of the county, but I won't interfere with that.
You can always submit comments written too.
Yeah. But the rural TAC, Carrie, do you want to talk to this?
Yes. Yes, I want to talk to you. So the Rural Technical Advisory Committee is going to be a new part of the GWRC Rural Transportation Work Program. Next slide. So currently, as you all know, the Banffo TAC combines the FAMPO jurisdictions and the GWRC jurisdictions into one group. But you haven't been seeing a whole lot of King George and Caroline.
We're very glad Craig is here today.
Chris is here today.
Sorry, Chris.
Yes.
He doesn't-
I know.
We're here so rarely, he doesn't even know which one of us is which.
True. I don't even know who they are.
In case.
But you know, as we know, this, the FAMPO TAC benefits from regular access to each other, to Florida comes all the way up here, VDOT, and other experts. See, nobody knows anything this morning. And we meet monthly at GWRC, but the issue is we're focused on the FAMPO jurisdictions because there's so much going on. So we rarely address issues in King George and Caroline. And so we don't usually see them. Next slide. So we've come up with a solution, a rural TAC for King George and Caroline. That committee was approved as a new committee by the GWRC board on 3/24. We're going to be holding it quarterly in the beginning, Q1 FY26, and they're going to advise the GWRC directly on rural transportation. This is going to be part of the rural work program, rural SPR funding, and it's going to streamline our current tasks that we do through the rural work program, such as local planning, smart scale assistance, and VDOT coordination. So this is going to be some VDOT folks, probably Kyle and David, who I've mentioned it to several times, but I haven't heard from GWRC staff, me, sometimes Ian, King George and Caroline planning staff and alternates. Meetings with the meetings will be public, so if you guys get a hankering to come on over, do so. Members of the two committees may attend each other's meetings, and we will report back to TAC, and then we'll report what y'all are doing to them. So you can have reciprocation. Next slide. That's it.
Yeah, I should say on the record, we had members of the policy committee from Spotsylvania asking whether Spotsylvania could be included at some level in the rural TAC, because some of their rural areas have similar problems to that. It's something we need to think more deeply about because it's complicated. It involves funding issues, it involves representation issues, it involves a whole bunch of things, and we don't want to be saying to the rural counties, oh, by the way, now we're coming to take over your meeting as well, right? So we need to think through all of those things, but we're going to chat. We're going to chat about that and see how best to handle that. But the primary initial goal is, hey, we want to better serve the rural counties by talking about things that are rural and in those counties. And we don't feel we're doing enough of that system. But as some others point out, maybe we don't talk enough at FAMPO about rural issues as well. So maybe we need to think about that.
We're going to get it established first. See what future is.
Thank you. Okay, so next item is the I-395 waste public comment period.
So nothing much to say there, except just to alert you to the public comment period. If you wish to make comments, please go ahead.
And lastly, just a meeting with FAMPO staff and VDOT TMPD based on the travel demand model.
Yeah, so this, we've shared it also with the policy committee and now with you. It's just their summary of our meeting, looking at the performance of the new model. I'm not going to read that whole thing through, you have it in your pack, but basically I think they're feeling that some of our population figures are a little on the high side and maybe rethink that. And they suggest there that a scenario planning exercise might help to look at what a medium population growth effect would be versus a higher population growth. So, feel free to read it, and if you have any questions or comments. I think that's all we needed to say.
Sounds good. So that is 9, number 10, agency report, and a update from VDOT on pipeline and star studies.
VDOT sent some lovely slides, but we'll leave it over to VDOT to talk about it.
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly, good timing. I can do this in less than 4 minutes. So Ian had asked us to bring forth some information about the planning studies that are going on in GWRC locality area. So if you skip to the next one. Here's a list of them. We'll start off with the stars, but as you're probably well aware, at the last CTB meeting, 7 new studies were approved for project pipeline. And of those 7, 5 of them are in this region. So. Let's see, Ladysmith Road, basically, we're looking to improve operational and safety improvements around the exit there, looking at I-95 on and off ramp approaches. This has been going on. Cassie Lord is still serving as the project manager, even though she's moved to TMPD. And she said that they've just wrapped up the first survey. And so that is, you're shaking your head, yeah. So, you know, you can still submit comments if you need to, but I should have probably put down URLs, but all these are online. Next one. And then I wanted to give you sort of an overview of where the pipeline projects are in this region. As you can see, 2 in Stafford, 1 in King George, 1 in Fredericksburg, and Spotsylvania. They're spread out pretty good. Again, this map is on the project pipeline website, and you can drill down and take a look at some of the statistics. Next one, Eugene. The next 5 slides are basically pulled from the project pipeline website, and they're talking about the limits, and I provided a map because as long as I've been here, I'm still learning where everything is and what's been done, and you know, previous projects, future projects, how they all coalesce. And so these, of course, as were mentioned before, all have VTrans needs. And I thought of listing those out, but they're pretty similar, and I think it would be a little too wordy, but a lot of bike pedestrian, shared use path, signage, that kind of thing. Next one. And again, this is the one in King George County. We could look at anything from maybe trying to smooth out the curves there to other safety options, but that's kind of the point of when we get into this. You know, we're going to have to see what are going to be the best cost-effective solutions. All right, next one. Again, this is Mine Road from Juggins Road Connector to Exeter Lane, Stafford County. And as always, we're looking to increase safety. Next one. And then this one's the one in Spotsy. Did you jump for joy when it was approved?
Yes, great.
Okay, once again, we're all about safety, so we're trying to figure out how to get traffic through there smoothly and less congested. And again, these are all in the slide deck if you want to, I mean, they'll be sent around after the meeting. And the next one. And Truslow Road, this one was added sort of late at the request of our CTV representative. And it's going to be kind of a huge project, but we're looking at the impacts of the high school and the new elementary school on these surrounding roadways, plus a new roadway. So we want to make sure that when that gets up and running, everything is running as smoothly and safely as we can. The next one. This is probably the most important slide to folks. We did just have an internal I should have put internal kickoff meeting. So all of our VDOT folks and all the different departments have met up. We met with stakeholders as well on those particular dates. And then this week, hopefully it'll stop raining. And next week, the consultant is coming out to do data collection and to do some field visits. If anybody wants to tag along, they're kind of open to having, so like I think Rachel from our office is going to be joining consultant for a couple of these. And after this, surveys will probably be staggered in May. Because I know people get tired of like surveys, like, did we do this one? Is this for the project I'm interested in? So we'll start to reach out more for communication and get input from the public. Next one. So here are the overall timeline. We're hoping to get this phase one completed by the summer, and those are pretty basic steps for planning studies, but diagnose the problems, collect the data, do the public outreach, and then the consultants and VDOT will do a preliminary screening of alternatives. And then by Thanksgiving, we'll move into phase two, and we'll do some alternatives analysis and development. We'll have more aggressive stakeholder working groups and public engagement. And then we'll select some hopefully preferred alternatives. And then if you look at the documents that were sent to us from the consultant, they actually said that phase three should be completed by August. I think, I don't know where Carrie went, but I think we're all agreed that we need to complete this a little bit, earlier. And so I put down June, kind of picking a date out because I do not want to be rushed for the next round of smart scale applications. And these pipeline projects can conceivably feed into other revenue sources. So I make sure we got all our ducks in a row. I think that's it.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Any questions for Linda?
Again, we have a project pipeline webpage that has the information, the maps, and it will continue to be updated with surveys and timelines. Thank you.
Thank you. So if there's nothing else,
Just a quick announcement. Becky has prepared some lunch for you all, and a snack lunch. And we're then doing reconvening in this room for the smart scale workshop with Oinky. Just remember the goal of this first workshop is to understand how the scoring works, how we get to those metrics, so that we are in a better position to be able to look in the future and be able to pre-score our own projects to know how well they might do in the scoring system. So let's try to keep the focus on that. We haven't actually appointed a chair because it's an informal workshop, but in view of the fact that the meeting has grown so much, I'm going to chair the meeting because we as staff called the workshop. It's not a subcommittee of FAMPO, just so that we're clear, because it's meant to be a staff workshop to help us understand the metrics. It's not meant to be a public meeting. No decisions are being taken at this meeting. Just letting you know so that if anybody misunderstands, we just give that clarity. So thanks everybody. Those who are coming to the staff workshop, we'll see you back after you've had some lunch.
Hey, Ian, I got a quick question. It's Adam.
Yeah.
Could you,
Yes.
Is there a virtual option to attend?
No, I'm afraid not. It's not a public meeting. We're just doing a staff workshop here at the office, and that's all that we're doing at the moment. It's not a decision meeting. It's just a workshop where OIP is going to explain to us how it works.
All right.
Nick?
One more thing before we adjourn, I just wanted to make an announcement that this will be my last regularly scheduled FAMPO TAC meeting. Will Montgomery over here in the back is going to be taking over as the primary for BRE. I'll come in when necessary, probably for things like system plan and those kinds of updates. So save all your really hard questions for the May meeting. When he's sitting here, then you can let him rip for VRE. But no, he'll be here, and I'll probably be attending virtually then, going forward.
You're staying at VRE?
Oh yeah, no, I'm not going anywhere. It's just,
Will you just ask the office to send us a
Yes.
notification of change of your members?
yes.
Because we keep those on record so that if anybody gets,
Yeah, I'll be the secondary, and then he'll be the primary.
it helps if we have to vote and then someone gets all upset that we got the wrong name. So
Yeah.
let's just do it formally.
Perfect.
Thank you, Nick.
Mhm.
I'll take a motion to adjourn. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Next meeting is May 5th at 9:30.
Thank you. I'm going to eventually move my stuff.